Hi everyone, and welcome to the first of British Rowing's lockdown webinar series. This is the Rower Development Guide Explained. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. This webinar is going to be recorded so that we can use the recording for a later date, and that will be able to be downloaded, as well as the slides that come with this webinar. That should be found on our website later. Regarding questions, as we go on, if you've got any questions for either James or Peter, then please do drop them in the question function. I will be collating them as we go through, and we'll have time at the end to answer some of those. If we don't get through all of them, then I'll ask James and Peter to put them together and answer them in a PDF that we can hand out and send that out to everyone. So without further ado, I'm happy to pass over to Peter Sheppard, who's the Chief Coach of Under-23s and Juniors, and James Andrews, who's British Rowing's Head of Performance Talent.
James.
Thank you, Dan. So just a quick one before we start proper. Today we'll be introducing everyone to the new and improved version of the Rower Development Guide. So in the presentation we'll be focusing on the content of the document, why it's in its current form, the different pillars, progression, the training guidance advice, why we think the focus should be on the whole rower, and also going through how to actually set up the guide. So with all that in mind, I will pass over to Shep.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for taking time to join us this evening. Hope everyone's safe and well and able to get a bit of daily exercise out in the sunshine at the moment. It's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to speak to everyone this evening and just build on a document that started back in sort of 2001, 2002, when I first came into working for British Rowing, and I was asked at the time around what were the guidelines for training for particularly for young people, around juniors to start with, but as we've evolved over time in the last sort of 18 years or so, we've been able to improve the documentation, improve the advice, and we are where we are today with the guide that was published on the 1st of April. There are some real key things for us to start with, is just to go through those objectives. We at British Rowing want to ensure that participants enjoy a lifelong involvement in our sport. To do this, it's important to develop the appropriate skills and abilities at a pace for our rowers, and focusing on the long-term process of development. As an example, the focus on training for new starters should be much more skill-based and enjoyable, rather than perhaps looking for speed straight away. It's important to remember as we go through this guide, it is intended for all new rowers starting our sport, and is a resource for those rowers, but for coaches, volunteers and parents to support those rowers in their activity in the sport. We want to make the rower the best rower they can be whilst enjoying the sport to the full, which doesn't necessarily mean winning medals or being the fastest crew on the water. I know in most cases this will be a priority, but our sport contains a wide number of pockets of activity, whether coastal rowing, indoor rowing, or on the water, and this guide is there to support all elements of our sport. We want to make the rower, as I said, the best rower they can be. The short-term goals can be things like rowing a certain distance, losing weight, or using rowing to improve your mental health. Some targets can be about goals at events, such as winning medals at a specific regatta, but it all needs to be relative to the rower you are coaching. With that in mind, the objectives on the screen in front of you of the Rower Development Guide are as follows, and they they're all important, so perhaps not in any particular order. Ensuring that the appropriate athletic skills and physical literacy for rowing and life are developed early in a rower's career and continuously thereafter. I think in this current climate, when we are able to return to our clubs and we can get back to the fundamentals of our sport and the principles behind developing a rower, now's the time for us to really reflect on what is important for our athletes. And we have an opportunity in this downtime and lockdown at the moment to perhaps really get our rowers to address some of these athletic skills and physical literacy that are important for being efficient in our sport. And that leads us to encouraging the long-term process of development. So when we look back in 10 years' time, perhaps for some of our younger members of our sport now, hopefully they are model athletes, because we've had that long-term process of development rather than achieving short-term outcomes of just winning. Objective 3 is to ensure that athletes train at the appropriate level depending on their ability, and developmental training age as well as chronological age should also be carefully considered. So a young, mature J14, J15 is completely different from a gangly, tall J14, J15 who is going through a growth spurt. So we have to make these adjustments to accommodate the rowers in front of us. Looking at the environment for developing a rower and the role coaches, family, and sometimes support staff can play in the lives of a developing rower. It's much more common now that people talk about well-being and an environment that allows people to thrive and enjoy our sport. So those are the key objectives behind this rower development guide. James, can you fire a slide up? Yes, thank you. Right, the rower development guide explained. Most of you will have heard of How Much and How Often, and that was the document that originally started in 2001, 2002. And as I said earlier, that was because I was being asked a lot around how much should a J14 do? How much should a J15 do? What's appropriate training for them? And the document was produced back then, and it's still current. It's our document for that How Much and How Often document is what it says on the tin. It is guidance because everybody's circumstances is slightly different, and you as a coach or a rower need to reflect, or even a volunteer and a parent need to reflect on what's appropriate for you. And we want people to have a trajectory going upwards in our sport and not find that they're doing everything in their first year. And we want people to do other sports, create those athletic skills, and that's where it leads to the rower development guide. This document can still be found on the website. It was last updated in 2019, and its focus is looking after the well-being of the athlete and the considerations coaches should be thinking about when creating a training program. There are elements in there around making sure you understand the whole person, what goes on outside their world of just in your rowing club or your school program, and it's about you making sure that you consider, if they are a member of a swimming club or play rugby or netball, that you don't overload a young rower in the sport. We launched the rower development guide, which is the second element of this whole package. We launched the rower development guide in December 2017, and that is through the very good work of James, who will follow on in a moment. He has put this together, and we really want the next generations of coaches to see this as a fundamental part of their toolkit, not just the rigger jigger that's in their tool bag, or the screwdriver and tape measure, but this is part of your toolkit as a coach, and that the rowers have an opportunity to challenge the coaches in the right way, because they can see and have access to this rower development guide to make sure that they are being provided with the right tools to develop as a rower. This guide came out as an evolution of the how much and how often document, and now works alongside, in parallel with the how much and how often document, to focus on the development of the rower and to assist coaches when developing what should be contained within a training program. Both documents encourage lifelong involvement in our sport, rather than just a focus on short-term goals. Today's young rower is tomorrow's secretary, captain, chairman of a university boat club or a community club. So we need these people to stay with us and stay involved in our sport for a long time and have a good experience on the way, so they come back to us when they move on from being active rowers into perhaps coaches or umpires of the future. Both documents are for rowers, but please remember, these are resources for everyone in our sport: coaches, parents, rowers, volunteers, as well as the rowers. James, I'm now hand you over to James to pick up on the next slide.
Thank you, Shep. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how the setup of the guide is presented. So to help the development of rowers, we split everything we thought users would like to see developed into 5 pillars split across 4 levels. So level 1 focuses on the start of a rower's journey when they begin the sport, and it's important to remember that we consider the rowers starting to be of any age. So any new participant starting our sport, and it will apply to 11-year-olds, 18-year-olds, or if you're starting at 80, we see people starting needing to learn the same things as everybody else. Rowers then work up, completing the content contained in each pillar until you reach level 4. And just to give an idea of what we consider level 4 to be, it's a target for our high-level competitive club rowers and those in high performance. This is where we would like people to aim to be when they start attending GB trials for either juniors or under 23s. Technically, people know that's not the end of a rower's journey. There'll be more levels above that, but the content included here we consider would cover the majority of the rowing community. Levels above this would be part of our top end performance pathway, where a coach or rower would be in contact with a GB member of staff, and hopefully they'll be getting a lot more tailored advice specific to that individual from them. Some important things to remember as we come on to the later parts of the presentation: the rate of progression through each level will vary depending on the individual and their training history. So as Shep was mentioning before, there was if you have a J14-15 athlete who is played rugby, being fit, they will probably progress quicker than somebody, the J14, who hasn't got that training history, particularly in some of the pillars. But again, each level is important, is just as important to a rower's development. If you skip things early on to have quick wins, you will probably find some hidden issues coming up later in that rower's lifetime in the sport. No level should be overlooked if you wish to give everyone an opportunity to thrive in our sport. We want to maximise their opportunities to enjoy rowing fully and as for a long time as possible. It's also important to note some rowers may remain in level 1 indefinitely or for at least a long period of time, and that's okay depending on what standard they wish to aim for. And also some rowers may move down those levels as well as up, depending on the amount of training they are doing or if they've had a break, or they're coming back from injury. So it's important to review what people can actually achieve. If you are using the guide to help develop yourself for competition or move up that performance pathway, there is training guidance in there, which Shep will come on to in the next slide. And that shows a little bit about how much specific rowing movement activity rowers should be doing at each level. You can use the guide without looking at that aspect. If you're just wanting to build up your development over the levels, you can do that as well. If you are wanting to use the guide, though, as a tool to help you progress up the performance pathway, each level does have an overview of types of advice on the amount of training, type of training, achievement targets you might want to think about, as well as recommended events a rower at each level might want to attend. And we'll show you that when we come to look at the guide a bit closer later on in the presentation. You could still complete many things at level 4, but you could still be a recreational rower training only once or twice a week on a row machine or on the water. And again, we'll come back later in the presentation to do that. So to help break down everything for each rower, we've split things into 5 pillars. First one, technical development. So that focuses on skills, technical abilities all rowers need to be able to try to be competent in. Athleticism, so that's the building blocks to allow rowers to be able to achieve a correct, effective and safe rowing movement and potentially help reduce the risk of injury. Oh, no, sorry, gone on the slide, go back. Sorry. Everything's marked up now. There we go. Right, so fitness, the amount of training the athlete will safely be able to maintain. Knowledge, understanding and application, so the information required to become a safe, well-rounded and self-aware athlete. And last but no means least, the ethos and behaviours, so the beliefs we want all rowers to stand by and showcase to show our sport in its best possible light. And with that, I will pass back to Shep, who will go through the training guidance page with you.
So when you go online onto the British Rowing website, you can access the Rower Development Guide, and James will take you through that through the document later on in this presentation. But the sort of one of the front pages is around what the Rower Development Guide is trying to achieve, and the training guidance for people coming into the sport. So people coming into the sport will all, as James has intimated, all come in at level 1. Some may progress through a little bit quicker than others and go through to level 4, but some may just take time and settle into level 1 or level 2, and that's their niche in the sport. In this diagram here, which hopefully you can see enough online, but you can definitely see it on the website, there are some key notes that go alongside that. And under development level, you will find advice. The advice is given on training amount is for rowers wishing to progress up the rowing levels. As an example, a rower may wish to stay rowing at the amount required for level 1, but still work on completing pillars above this level. If the rower then wishes to progress, it is recommended they spend some time training at the level 2 guidelines before progressing to level 3. So at level 1, the focus of number of sessions per week is around 2, and really completely around skill development only. And what you'll notice is that the session lengths should be very small, and the hours of training per week correspond to that, and that's for rowing specific activity. The reason why skill development only in those early stages is that's where not only can you bring in good habits, but also if you get it wrong, you can bring in bad habits, and they're ingrained. So you can ingrain good habits straight away, but you can also ingrain bad habits straight away at that point. And our our bit there is the linking to that is the requirements of age, and the age requirement is the minimum age for any rower to start the relevant levels. A new rower is older than the suggested minimum age should still start their rowing level life at level 1, as I intimated earlier, but may progress through a little bit quicker because they're a bit more physically able and can pick up skills more easily. Remember that if you're starting youngsters at 11, 12 or 13, they're still going through big growth spurts. Their levels of concentration can be limited at times. So you need to keep those sessions short and sweet. In the number of sessions per week, you get some prescribed there, and what you've got there is the average number of sessions and perhaps the maximum number of sessions. And again, this is guidance. We're very aware that in some sort of more high performing programs at the top end of level 4, maybe moving those a little bit, 1 or 2 sessions more per week. But for those people early into our sport, they're still got a long time in our sport. There is no need to push on at those levels. The number of sessions refers specifically to the number of rowing specific sessions, and any session where you're simulating the rowing movement, in other words, either on the water or on land. It's one thing I would like to bring to this is just about the ergometer and the use of the ergometer. And I think that is a training tool that perhaps for our younger age group that come into the sport is often misused for physical gains rather than technical gains. And I would strongly urge coaches to find other ways of completing the athletic training that you want for fitness, rather than just sitting on the ergo and perhaps doing that badly. It is expected and encouraged that a new rower will be doing more than 2 activity-based sessions a week other than just rowing. So that if you go back to level 1, there are 2 skill development only sessions, but there may be a circuit or a run or some other physical activity that you engage them in your club program. It's important they are encouraged to participate in other activities to develop an athlete with a varied skill set. So if they are at a 15, 16-year-old and they've still got other sporting interests, keep those going, because they will probably be developing other athletic skills alongside what you're developing in the rowing. But this can also include other non-sporting activities like drama or playing an instrument, etc., etc. If someone has come from another sport with a significant training history, we would still aim to keep the number of rowing specific sessions as recommended as they develop those skills first. And when they're more competent in the relevant areas, then they can move on. They could, of course, continue to do a significant amount of cross training to maintain their fitness levels. So there is a couple of other notes there. So note 4 sits again above those number of sessions and the maximum number of sessions. Again, those are maximum of rowing specific sessions. And as I said earlier, you may hear of programs that do more sessions in a week. I'm sure they're not all rowing specific. So just manage that and make sure that the average is what you would normally see during the majority of someone's training at this level. And maybe there are peaks within the year where you might do a few more as and when the water conditions allow and we're able to get in a boat again. The number of sessions may be more than the number shown in the guidance if for a specific reason, such as a training camp, for example. But that again needs managing. And I'm sure if you're dealing with a school program, you're likely to have to manage academic requirements on a school training camp as well. The last column that I want to give some notes on is the length and intensity of the session. And this should depend on the rower maintaining good technique and good posture, and basically holding form in a way that they are applying force to the foot plate with in a strong and safe way. The quality of the session has to stay high, and the stage at which the rowers become tired and where technique and posture fluctuate are where the rower is most prone to injury. So again, there's some guidance there around the suitability of session length, and in the hours of training per week, they reflect that as well. Finally, in the notes on the right-hand side, there's a little bit around at the bottom right, where activity for J14 and under should be sculling only. That's part of British Rowing's rules of developing young people in the sport, and athleticism should be the priority for all coaches developing people who are very new to the sport. For those under 16 and new to strength training, then you again have to reflect where people are in their maturation, and make sure that you start with basic movement patterns before applying any extra load. So the movement patterns can involve conditioning exercises, tissue conditioning exercises, and we have advice for that available for those that want to contact either Aid Roberts, Dan, Cooper, James, or myself on certain exercises for that. And as a rower develops, then, and as they learn to apply force safely in the gym, then yes, of course, there is the opportunity to load a little bit more. For me, I'm going to stop there now and hand you back over to James for the next few slides.
Thank you, Shep. So I'll talk a little bit about the progression, how we see people moving through the guide and using that training guidance at the moment. So the flow we see athletes moving through, as we've mentioned, everybody starts at level 1. Then in their training, the focus could be on any of those 5 training areas, depending on their training history. Thinking about the number of sessions we recommend for that level, it's important to remember rowers may be doing more activity sessions, as Shep mentioned, and depending on what your aims are, you probably should be. It's important to encourage rowers, though new to the sport, that the additional session should be other activities, so cross-training, and we'll come on to a club example later about that. At a certain point, coaches may want to assess rowers' ability against the criteria laid out in the guide. So if the answer to the question, do they meet all the criteria, is no, you'd probably want to continue training following the guidance on their current development level. However, you may want to rethink what is in their training program to focus on which of the pillars are weaker. And remember, that includes all the criteria in all the development levels. So if you are currently on level 3, but there's one thing or 2 things you can't do on level 1, that brings you right down to level 1. You have to make sure that the rowers can complete everything on the lower pillars as well. If they do meet all the criteria in their current level and want to progress the amount of training they do, still have to consider their training age. We want to make sure that the younger rowers can really do all their stuff well, and we're not trying to drive them up that development, up the levels too quickly. So we recommend they continue to do the session count at the level which is for their age. And they can continue, but what they can do is they can continue to develop the criteria listed in the higher pillars. So just because we still recommend that they do potentially 2 sessions a week if they're a 12-year-old, they can still try and achieve some of the criteria laid out in the pillars higher up. If they meet all the criteria laid out and they meet the minimum age, then if they choose to, they can progress up to the next development level and increase the amount of recommended sessions focusing on rowing movement if they wish. And to help users go through that process, in our new updated version of the Rower Development Guide, we have this. It's a rower profile, which when we come on to looking at the guide a bit deeper in a second, we'll go into in a bit more detail. Within each pillar, we've now got a checkbox system. So you can check off which things people are competent in. Some things are very clear cut. So if we have skills, it's very clear cut. Can they do how many rigger dips in 30 seconds? Some things maybe not so clear cut, and coaches will have to use their judgment on agreeing with athletes if they can or cannot do something. As you can complete more, your individual rower profile will begin to evolve, showing what levels you've completed and what you may wish to focus on. And we'll show you that in a bit more detail in a second. But first, we wanted to show you a club example of some good practice. And we're going to use Durham University Boat Club and their Freshers programme from 2017-18. So just a bit of background about Durham University Boat Club. Durham University as a whole runs a very extensive Learn to Row programme each year, regularly getting over 500 newcomers into the sport each year using the college system. Within that, Durham University Boat Club Freshers programme brings in a more performance focus to try and get rowers up into the senior DUBC programs. So what we'll be focusing on is the 2017-18 season, when the development programs took on roughly 16 rowers of both genders, so 32 rowers total at the beginning of the year, and they changed their approach to development for the freshers with the then coach Eddie Hissett. So this is just a bit of an overview of what their year looked like. So the first 6 weeks, building up to Christmas, they had 2 water sessions in a week, which were both singles, skill-based. They didn't actually go very far away from the bank, and all the rowers were within a throw line's distance. And the way I remember Ellie telling me that she did this was she would actually get one of the freshers in a boat, one of the freshers on the bank with the throw line, and they would actually try and coach each other while they're doing it. So they're learning through teaching, they're learning through doing as well. They would have 1 ergo session a week, which was a UT1, but they had very strict rules that if their split dropped too low or their technique failed, they were asked to get off and do cross training. They had 1 tank session a week, which was completely technical focus, no pressure on their lower back, and they had no flow, so the oars they used had wires around the edge. They were literally just going through the movement. They would also do 2 cross training sessions, which were swimming or cycling, and 1 on the track as well, where they would do squats, running interval based sprinting and things like that. After every session they did, they also did an 8-minute core workout, which where they assessed every 3 weeks as to if they were improving or not. So after Christmas, when they'd done this pre-schedule, which you could more or less say was level 1, they went on to focusing on the tideway heads. So they moved people into quads and 8s and made sure they continued to rotate positions and sides continuously. So everybody got a chance to stroke, everybody got a chance to steer. People didn't really consider if they were bow side or stroke side because they just did both sides, changing all the time. They did 4 water sessions, and that was no more than 10K in any of those sessions. 1 was skill-based, 1 was a UT1 row, and 2 were technical paddles. They did 2 ergos a week, which was started as being 6 times 5 minutes, building up to a full UT1 30 minutes. But if their technique failed, they stopped and they did the rest of the time squats. They did 2 S&C sessions a week as well. This is when they started doing S&C. And the first half of the term focused on mobility, the second half of the term focused on movement patterns. And they also continued to do cross training. So they were doing on track and squats and running interval-based training still. And that's the growth between level 2 and level 3. And the build up to Bucks Regatta is when they started doing a few more water sessions. So 1 was technical, 2 were crew formations, 2 were interval-based sprinting, so 500 meters, 1Ks, getting them ready for that 2K at Bucks Regatta. None of the sessions fell longer than 10K, so they all remained under that 10K distance. They did 1 ergo a week, which was 2K based prep, interval training, so 45-minute total erg, including warm-up and cool-down, and then 15 minutes focused on mobility and core work. And they also still did 2 S&C sessions, which was focusing on deadlifting and squatting and building the power for the stroke. So the results of all those training, and one of the biggest things for Durham University Boat Club, was the increased number of athletes able to progress into their senior squad. The numbers increased going up. And the other important thing was, as they did move up, they weren't limited to which seats they could go in the boat. So they could scull, they could sweep both sides, they could steer, and they could stroke, because they got used to that pattern of changing position, changing places all the time. There was a reduced injuries, so no rower that year got an injury from their rowing program. And the prime example of what happened that year is one of their rowers moved up their club single rankings in their 500 meter time trials that they do, and ended up with a 92% GMT for their squad, which is really quite impressive for somebody who learned to row that year. On top of that, and probably one of the least important things, but still important, their results at Bucks Regatta, very similar to results they previously had before. So not only had their results remained the same, quite a lot of that other content progressed really well with them. And with that, that's the example of the of a good club-based program, and we'll get more into the nitty-gritty of the guide. Apologies if this is a little small on your screens, but we're not going into detail on the guide. We're just giving you an overview, and hopefully you'll be able to go away after this and really sort of use the guide fully. One thing I will add is, if you have downloaded the guide before today, I noticed a small bug in one of the checkboxes. So there is a very small update on RowHow. So if you have downloaded it before, I would recommend you go back and re-download it. Apologies for that. But one of the things when you first open it is, it's really important to enable the content when you open it. It is a macro-enabled Excel document, and this welcome screen and the filters are the reason why. So when you open up the guide, if you just type in your details, the rower profile won't come up. I don't know why that happened, but you can see it will start filling out the document, and you select the information that's important to you. And the reason why you want to do that is, when you click on the guide and it applies the filters, it's only going to show content that's relevant for you. And there's an issue. It didn't do this earlier. Oh well, prime time. Let's try that again. So yeah, go to guide. Applying filters. Are we in luck? Hopefully you'll have a much smoother ride of it on your versions at home. Yeah, so it's applying filters in the background. So give it a few seconds to actually apply those filters. It's running a bit slower on my computer at the moment because we've got the webinar open and the programs. But once that's all done, it'll filter out everything for you to just show the information that's relevant for you. Once that's all done, we do recommend saving it with a username for you. So if you've got multiple rowers, you might want to have them save it as their name, as an example. Once you've done that, just a quick way to navigate it. All these buttons work. It'll take you off to the relevant pages. One good tip to note is the British Rowing logo on all the pages will take you back to that menu. So if you ever get lost, you can click the British Rowing logo and it will take you back to that home screen. So this is the new bit of version 2, really, that we've got going, which is the rower profile. So on each of the pillars now, we have checkboxes. So you can tick off what you can complete, what you can do, what you're competent in, and then it will start building up your rower profile. So you can see, because I'm competent in everything in level 1 fitness, it's now got a badge for me, and it's removed that from the suggested focuses because I'm weaker at the other pillars, and I can focus on those other pillars to help me progress as the whole rower. In proper Blue Peter fashion, here is a version I prepared earlier. And as you can see, I'm stronger in some areas, I'm weaker in others. At the moment, I'm on level 1 for both athleticism and fitness, so it's recommending that I focus on those areas. As soon as I go to complete those, so I've got fitter, my athleticism's improved. You can see on the profile, it's now recommending my focus changes, and I start building up the 4 pillars that I'm now equal at. So I'm still quite strong at ethos and behaviours there. So that's how that rower profile works. Again, the British Rowing logo takes you back. Another really important thing to point out in this guide is it's not just the content at face value. There is a lot of links to help you support with certain aspects of your rowing as well. So if we show here, we have documents showing you how to, let me bring that across because it's loaded on the screen. So you can see it will come up with exercises on how to do stuff, how to set up, how to initial movement. This is just one example of a back squat. If we go back to the guide, not that version, you can also see you can download loads of stuff. There's links to videos, links to documents, things from RowSafe, all over the place. We do recommend you have a good deep dive into it. Can be a little daunting when you first open up the document because it is quite large, but the more you get used to it, the more you focus on the areas you feel like you need to focus on, there will be content there which hopefully you will find really useful. And it's good just to have a play and a search of it. So yeah, just some of the setup tips for you there. So again, it's macro enabled. Please make sure you enable that content. You may have to enable editing as well, depending on your version of Excel. We are looking to improve that as well, but we're wanting to get the content developed first. After you set up the guide, make sure you save it as a unique name for that user. For coaches, if you're thinking, well, there's tons of pages here, I just need to know what my rower is at. What we would recommend is actually ask your rowers to keep their own individual version and print off their rower profile for you. So that will be a 1-page sheet, and you'll see where all your rowers are stronger, all your rowers are weaker. Again, the British Rowing logo takes you back to that main menu. Lots of useful links in the document. Please make sure you just have a look at them. The guide contains a lot of information as well, so make sure you focus on what's relevant for you. And the really important thing, where can you get the guide from? So if you go to our learning hub, which is RowHow, it will be at www.rowhow.org. It will be one of the main tabs on the very front page. So if you look there, it will say Rower Development Guide. You can go down there, download the Excel version, which is interactive, or there is a PDF version to make it just easy printable for coaches, so you can have a read on paper if you prefer to do that. And with that, I will pass you back to Shep.
Thank you, James, and thank you for just walking people through a whistle-stop tour through the guide. What I would say to everybody, and I said earlier, is that this is a tool for coaches going forward, but it's there for everybody: rowers, coaches, volunteers, athletes, umpires. Will enjoy just getting through it and understanding how we as a sport want to develop our rowers. What I would say to to everybody that's listening, whether you're coaches or athletes, is to link yourself into the guide when you get a moment, and I think you probably all have plenty of moments in the coming few weeks and months possibly, and go and explore the guide and see what resources are and guidance are available to you as a coach, an athlete, a parent, or a volunteer to support your rowers, to support you as an individual if you are a rower going forward. The 5 pillars have been sort of worked up over since 2017 when we started putting this document together, this piece of work together. The obvious bits, which I think people would always have at the forefront of their rowing, would be the technical development, the athleticism, and the fitness. They're the sort of bits that traditionally our sport has been about. But the 2 other pillars, the knowledge, understanding, and application, and the ethos and behaviours, are really important now in the modern world we now work in. That please take time to read those, go through those pillars, because there are important bits in there that will help just the wider understanding of our sport and what's required to allow an athlete to perform in that sport, in our sport. Just, you know, and as I said, we have time now, and now's the time to make sure that we underpin our support to our rowers in a way that we've never had the chance before. You know, the bus has stopped at the moment, the wheels have stopped turning. We can make a difference to our sport going forward if we use the knowledge that's available in this resource. Just remind you of those objectives again. We're ensuring that we have appropriate athletic skills and physical literacy for rowing, and life are developed early in a rower's career. We're encouraging the long-term process of development rather than just short-term outcomes. And we're there to ensure that athletes train at the appropriate level, depending on their ability, developmental age and training age, as well as chronological age should also be carefully considered. And it's what we put around the rowers, the club environment, the training environment, the support for the individual. Those are all areas which we can improve on now, and be ready for when we do come out of this extraordinary period in time, and be ready to do this better going forward. James, over to you, or I think perhaps we've got questions first.
Mute. So yeah, we've got questions now, so hopefully we've got about a 15-second delay between us presenting and you seeing. So if you want to type in your questions, we'll give it a few seconds, and Dan's been looking through them, so hopefully Dan will come back on and ask us some of those questions.
Right, thank you first to Shep and James. There has been a few questions that have come in, and they are continuing to come in. As I said right at the beginning, if we don't get through to your questions, we will take them all, answer them, and then get back to those that have asked them, and those that we think are worthwhile, we will worthwhile everyone knowing, we will email out to everyone. So first off, James, maybe one for you. Other than the water sessions and the ergos, what other sessions would you count as rowing specific sessions? Are there other ones?
So anything we consider a rowing specific session is where you're putting load under your back and under your lower back. So anything where you are essentially just doing that rower movement. So generally that's going to be on a rowing machine or on water. If you're doing, there's probably not much else that would be considered a rowing movement session.
Okay, thanks, James. A question that I might answer as a British rowing educator. Someone's asked when will the row development guide be included in the level 2 club coach material. It is in the process of that being added in as we speak. And regarding all of our education, it's being looked at, and how what information we're giving out and how we are best educating our coaches. And with this document now firmly entrenched into our thinking, we definitely want to put that into our level 2 club coach. So that is on process. James, probably again back to you regarding the Durham Boat Club beginner program example that you gave. What stage would you suggest the athletes end up? What stage in the row development guide would you think that these athletes that were in the beginner program got to at the end of the year?
Thinking if they're going to progress into that senior program at Durham University, would probably hope that they'd be getting into level 3 at the end of the year. So the first aspect, depending on the athletes and their training history, they might actually go through level 1 fairly quickly. Level 2 might be a bit longer, but hopefully they'd have most of the things completed in level 2 to be able to progress to level 3. It does depend on the individual, so you have to be sensible and use some common sense as a coach to where people should be. But moving into a senior program and knowing the load of training they'll be doing, you would hope level 3.
Right, a technical Excel question here. If the guide is being updated regularly and we have already filled in a version, will it automatically retain input information when you upgrade it to the next version that we download from the website?
So unfortunately not, no. At the moment we've been very focused on developing the content of the guide, what's in there, and making sure it's usable for coaches. So it unfortunately won't update the checkboxes for each individual rower. We are looking at how we can improve that, so whether it's a website or an app, we are looking at those ways, but it will take some time for us to be able to do that properly. That's where we want to aim for, though.
Okay, thanks, James. Shep, one for you. I know that this was brief. If we're encouraging a junior to continue with another sport alongside the maximum amount of rowing sessions in the RDG, when does it get too much for a junior? And then secondly to that, is there a recommended number of maximal amount of sessions? And then lastly, could you give some advice about how you might manage that with athlete and parent expectations?
Okay, very good question. That there's probably no right or wrong answer to this. I think it's around conversations around what a young person is doing, what a junior is doing in their everyday life. I think it's having an understanding of the academic demands alongside the physical training demands as well, that a young person might have. I think youngsters, to take a step back, I would encourage youngsters to have a wide range of sporting skills and sporting activity for as long as possible. It's only going to stand them in good stead for life as an adult. So when they become an adult, they're having a skill to take another sport up. Hopefully they want to stay with rowing, but that may not always be feasible with a boat club nearby where you end up in a job somewhere. So a wide range of athletic skills and sporting experience is a good thing. I think youngsters, I think J15s is a period where we can catch people in the sport and get them excited by our sport for the future. And I think that's still a time when they should be mixing across sports. I think by the time they become to J16, J17, J18, I think those young people have an understanding of themselves. They have the information that they need to make a choice often in their lives, and they will probably have those conversations with their parents, and they may want to commit more to one sport than another. I know our national team, for example, many of them are very, very keen cyclists and enjoy some running and some swimming, and are very adept in those activities as well, but have chosen rowing as their number one sport to follow and their passion to follow. So I think there's no right or wrong answer there, but it's about good conversations and understanding the individual concerned.
Brilliant. James, one for you. It was about, sorry, it's just scrolled away because we're getting many questions coming in now, which is fantastic. But the question basically was around whether the rower development guide could be used to look at the whole squad in one document, or whether we would need separate spreadsheets for each athlete.
So not at the moment. You need a separate profile for each athlete. It is something we have thought about, and we will look into for potentially the next version. Hopefully, I'm hoping this will be the last version of the guide in Excel, and I'm hoping the next version would be in at least a website format. And that is definitely one of the things we've considered. We want to have a very simple overview page for coaches to see their whole squad and to see where each of their rowers are on each pillar, so they can get an overview of the entire squad, and where the weaknesses are, where the strengths and weaknesses are of the entire squad, not just individual rowers. That's something we want to achieve, but it's not something we've been able to do yet.
Shep, would you recommend a minimum number of sessions at each stage in a university program? For example, a university program where the athletes have only 3 or 4 years and they want to enjoy and be as successful as possible in that time frame.
Is there a minimum number, you say?
Yeah.
Sorry, is that a question from Colin Williamson?
That was the question that was.
Yeah, I think, is there a minimum number? I think our sport should cater for anybody that wants to come into our sport. And if somebody wants to do once a week, but that's what they want to do, then we have to facilitate that with where we possibly can. You know, that person that might want to do once a week may well be the secretary, the treasurer, the club captain of the future, but that's what they want to do as an individual. So no, there isn't a minimum number. I don't think. I think our sport has to cater for that. Now that may not fit every club's DNA, but where we can help people come in to the sport and just enjoy it, you know, that we have other activities like Explore Rowing, where people may only come down once every 2 weeks.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Shep. I mean, I think I've now been corrected by the person who stated that question. Though I think that is still a valid question. Is there and either of you can take this, is there a minimum time that an athlete should stay at a stage?
No.
Who wants to take that? No. Okay.
People
lovely.
should progress,
right.
progress when they're ready.
Okay. We've kind of run out of time, and I've got questions still coming in. What I'm going to do there is stop the questions for now, the live questions. As I said, we will go through these and report back to everyone that has attended and answer them all. I just wanted to say thank you very much. We've had a huge attendance for this, which has been brilliant. There's been a lot of hard work put in, and we really do believe this is a great guidance document that can be used. On Thursday, just going through on the rest of the webinars that are happening this week. On Thursday, we have Jörg Goltz looking at checking in with your athletes, peers, parents, and other key stakeholders of your program. Jörg has worked with multiple high-level athletes, both at Olympics and at key international regattas over the last 6 cycles. He's been working with GB Rowing for the last couple of years. I've worked with him personally, and I think that it will be a fantastic session. Whether it will be as interactive as we wanted, because the sign-ups are going through the roof, which is fantastic, but there will definitely be, you'll definitely be able to pull stuff from that session. So I hope that we will see you again then soon. James, is there anything from you?
No, just to thank everybody for coming, and I hope everybody's safe and well and enjoyed the webinar. Like Dan mentioned, we've got a series of webinars coming up. And I also wanted to thank everybody who took part in the survey about the guide a couple of months back. And again, if anybody's got any feedback or future questions, I think we're going to go through the questions which have come in. But if anybody does have any further feedback they would like to share, my email address is on the screen now. Yeah, I think that's everything.
Brilliant. And Shep?
Can I just say thank you to everybody that's linked up this evening. We will, James is I think going to put together a feedback form which will come back to you, which we hopefully you'll have time to fill in, but also we will come back and answer those questions that Dan's got stacked up waiting to be answered. So thank you very much, and go and explore the guide, please. That's, I think, the most important thing now is for you as coaches and athletes to link in and see what resources are there. And if you've got some ideas, please email them to James. You may have a video that we haven't got or a resource we haven't seen yet that you think would be valuable, would be valued to on the website. Thank you.